Hey there folks, Rel here. Today we'll be re-reviewing the Infiltrator's EMP grenades as they were changed a fair amount in the Infiltrator update. We'll take a look at all the quirks associated with the grenade itself and show off how to use them effectively, as well as talk a little bit about the new role that they play in the broader scheme of things. EMP grenades are a class-specific tactical grenade available to the Infiltrator class. You can pick them up for 200 certifications and then they'll become an available alternative to your standard frags. EMP grenades detonate almost on impact. It's actually a little under half a second after they make contact with a surface or an enemy, and even so, during that short window they will not bounce. Where you stick them is where they're going to detonate. Also, these grenades will air detonate after about 3 seconds unless they make contact with another surface before that. In the broader sense, EMP grenades seem to detonate in about a 12-meter radius, but the effects of detonation vary based on line of sight and distance from the blast. It's also worth noting that EMP grenades have zero effect on vehicles. That said, upon detonation, EMP grenades cause a whole bunch of fun things to happen, so we'll break each effect down individually. First and foremost, EMP grenades are going to scramble your HUD. So when you're affected, you'll see a sort of electromagnetic static blur on the screen, and it's also going to remove your health bar, ability bar, ammo, and minimap. But your reload timer, your objectives, your terminals, and your waypoints and Doritos are all going to stay. The closer to the impact you are, the more scrambled your HUD will become, but the difference actually isn't that dramatic based on range. However, the HUD scrambling can actually stack in effectiveness when multiple EMP grenades are thrown on a single target. A single EMP grenade is an inconvenience, but a few of them will severely hamper your vision. A scrambled HUD makes it a little bit more difficult to figure out who's your enemy and who's your friend, which can, in turn, be a boon to your actual ability to infiltrate. If you're out of line of sight of the impact area, you will not have your HUD scrambled. The static effect lasts for about 8 seconds, but starts wearing out at around the 6-second mark. If you're on the very brink of that 12-meter radius, then for all intents and purposes, it's going to count you as if you were out of line of sight of the blast, even though you will still be affected by other aspects of the grenade. Both enemies and allies are affected by this function, as well as max units and exposed infantry on vehicles, so your flash ATV and your infantry on rumble seats. Next up, EMP grenades will drain your shields, so if you're within line of sight of the blast, your shields are going to go down for 10 seconds. However, if you have advanced shield capacitor equipped, they go down for however long your ASC says that they'll be down for, so that's 6 seconds at max rank. If you are not within line of sight of the blast, your shields will get reset instantly, as in they do not stay down. They'll drop to 0, and then they'll instantly start working their way back up to full. And in case you're curious about how long it takes your shields to get from 0 to full, it's 4 seconds. So if you're clever, you can use an EMP grenade to kickstart your own shield regen as well. That said, here's the catch. This line of sight trick only works against certain objects, namely prefabricated buildings. So not obstacles or terrain. It's really technical, and I haven't figured out everything that does and does not cause this effect, mostly due to a lack of infantry resources, but you can tell in some of the footage here what will and will not work. However, if you are under the effects of a scrambled HUD already, meaning that you've already ate the full effect of an EMP blast, you cannot use the shield reset trick. Being EMP'd essentially makes you immune to that little cantrip. And this is good news if you're trying to breach a room and you don't know exactly where your enemies are, so if you have a grenade bandolier equipped, you can toss a few EMPs in at different angles, and this will be more likely to drop the enemy shields instead of just resetting them. The shield depletion does not depend on the range at which you are from the grenade's impact. It only depends on the line of sight. So unless you're at the very, very brink of the blast radius, like we talked about earlier, you're still going to get your shield sapped. As a side note, if your shields are already down and you get hit by an EMP detonation, you're actually going to take around 20 health damage. It's not a big deal obviously, but I thought it was kind of funny, and I believe that the same goes for the other tacticals like the concussions and the flashbangs as well. In addition to the shield reduction, it also pulls infiltrators out of stealth and drains their cloak's energy. It's a bit ironic, but now Infiltrator is the only class that faces an energy depletion effect where, if I recall correctly, it used to be able to work against heavy assault over shields as well.
Doesn't look like it's shutting off.
So if you're struck by an EMP, your energy gets set to 0, which will remove your cloak. You can still reactivate your cloak while you are EMP'd, but your energy will be so low that it really won't matter. In the case of a Stalker cloak, however, you will be pulled out for a moment and then instantly be able to reactivate it and regenerate it, provided you're sitting still. This could lead to some pretty interesting tactics, being able to practically sit on top of a group of enemies to ensure a proper EMP and then disappear back into the shadows again. Also, this energy drain does not require line of sight to work. The last feature of the EMP grenade is that it now destroys all sorts of different equipment. This includes enemy spawn beacons, mines, C4, as well as motion sensors and recon darts. In the case of landmines and C4, they will actually detonate, meaning that you have the potential to kill enemies standing too close to mines. However, detonating explosives in this way will not give you kill credit. It instead gives the kill credit to whoever dropped the mines in the first place, which means that enemies are going to show up as basically killing one another, which I find absolutely hilarious to say the least. It's also worth noting that you cannot destroy allied equipment or mines with an EMP, which includes the mines that you yourself drop. Destroying enemy equipment, explosives, or recon darts with EMP grenades will not grant you experience. However, you will get assist experience on enemies that die who are affected by your EMP. The best part about this feature though is that you do not need line of sight to blow things up. So when you boil things down, the new EMP grenade can create some interesting dynamics for a handful of different reasons. You gain radar sweeping capabilities, you gain better breaching capabilities, spawn beacon denial, and that's on top of being able to detonate enemy anti-tank mines and chop enemy shields in half. All classes in PlanetSide 2 now have some form of limited radar detection, be it from a recon device, a scout radar equipped vehicle, or sensor bolts from a crossbow. EMP grenades give you the chance to completely wipe the slate clean in the case of recon darts and sensor darts. Of course, grenades are more costly and aren't as spammable as darts, but rarely do you see that one guy just sitting on an ammo box spamming darts unless that person is already bored and sitting on a capture point, and when this does happen, it's usually in medium-sized battles. In especially large battles, radar spamming happens as well, but it isn't always necessary, as you sometimes have scout radar flashes or ESFs roaming, or just camped out somewhere smart, able to observe the enemy at all times and rake in free experience more quickly and more easily than an infiltrator can. More commonly, in smaller battles, you'll see a single dart or a handful of darts being dropped at a single time, and then the player pulls out their primary and joins the fight. So the ability to completely erase someone's recon spread creates some small-scale counterplay for the class. It's not perfect, of course. It would still be nice to see deployable sensor jammers in the future to deal with the larger scale battles, but for now this is a pretty good place to start. More important than the radar clearing is your ability to clear enemy defenses as you breach a room. So prior to the update, you could expect spawn rooms, generators, capture points, and choke points to be littered with enemy mines. Now you can completely sweep an entire area of explosives, which allows your allies to make a solid push without having to look down at their feet. This will force players to be smarter and unconventional with their mine placement or risk wasting resources. That being said, if you're approaching a high value area, do yourself and your teammates a favor and clear out the explosives before they go in. Another powerful application of the EMP grenade is to counter enemy spawn beacons. Usually, it's a light assault that's going to climb high out of reach, where you can't find or see the beacon in itself, and then you'll have to cope with waves of enemy infantry. If you're stuck defending in, say, a biolab, and the enemy has a beacon up on the rim of the lab, or on the roof even, as a light assault you can't actually do anything about it, because even though you have jetpacks, the enemy has the landing pad choke point held down, and you're under house arrest unless you spawn at a different base. An infiltrator, however, will be able to eat an enemy spawn beacon that's placed almost anywhere in a biolab. They just use the grenade's AoE to pierce through the biolab dome and destroy the beacon on the outside. Because of this, infiltrators now have a very powerful method of limiting enemy respawns, and I feel like this role really fits the class. It's not unusual to see enemies laying down anti-tank mines defensively at vehicle choke points like the hill that leads up to the crown. At the same time, they'll also be rolling their own vehicles out of the vehicle bay and over their own mines as they head into battle. Now, if you can use an EMP grenade to force anti-tank mine detonations, it's a good way to take out enemy vehicles, turning their own resources against them. The last and most traditional use of EMP grenades is to waylay enemies after landing a nice detonation. If you stumble upon a group of enemies who are oblivious to your presence, being able to drop their shields for 10 seconds can open up a world of possibilities for those with good aim and a good weapon. Your bolt-action sniper rifles will instantly become a one-shot kill, as will the new crossbows and your knife. The semi-auto snipers and scout rifles become two-shot kills, as well as the harder-hitting pistols. And so if you're trying to be sneaky with the Stalker Cloak, then a harder-hitting faction-specific secondary will let you mop up a handful of enemies at once. High-capacity SMGs are a good option as well if you're not running Stalker Cloak, but tossing a successful EMP in close quarters is much more difficult to do. Even if you toss it around the corner and dodge line of sight of the blast, you'll at the very least be resetting your own shields and draining your cloak's energy. It's for that reason that when you're learning how to use EMPs offensively like this, it's probably better to go for these safe throws from a distance, and then have a nice ranged weapon to back you up. As you get better at it over time, you can start closing the gap and slaying groups of enemies in those high-risk, high-reward situations. But that is about all I have for strategy. Overall, I think that the EMP grenade changes were a nice step forward for the Infiltrator class as a whole. The new features allow EMPs to be useful for breaching important areas, denying squad beacon respawns, and cleaning up enemy recon devices. Those are things that any infiltrator can accomplish without requiring a huge level of skill. At the same time, you still have the option of destroying groups of enemies, resetting your own shields, and other upper level techniques that require higher amounts of skill. If this video has been interesting, helpful, or entertaining, please feel free to like, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel, and if you have found an interesting use for the EMP grenade, or if you have any stories where your EMP changed the tide of battle, or just let you pull off something really cool, share those stories in the comment section down below. Thanks very much, folks. We're all signing off.